Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Marc and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. I'm your host, Justin Wolf, joined by my co-host, as always, Marc Regala. Marc, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing really well. How about you, Justin?
Doing all right. I mean, I was doing much better before I ran through that bag of sour Skittles, and needless to say, they are nowhere to be found except an empty wrapper. I'm glad that brings such joy to your face.
You beat me to the question. I was going to ask you, what was your candy of choice tonight while you're recording the podcast, but you already ate them all already.
Man, it was bad. I have a nice coworker here. She keeps a thing of lemon heads on her desk. That the number of lemon heads in that jar is significantly decreased at this point. So
you're turning into a lemon head with that shirt on too.
Look at you. I also have a similar size on tonight to you. I just want to be like you, man. Those snug fits.
I was about to say, you must have had a good winter in the gym. Those short sleeve shirts are looking a little tighter on you.
Hey, tell me more, Marc. Tell me more.
Well, you've been texting me. We've been talking. You've been in the gym 5 o'clock in the morning every day. I know that. I commend you on that. Well, yeah, I mean, most days, unless you got a soccer game at 10 o'clock at night, but you're getting that's a 2-a-day the day before, so you're eligible to take a day off the next day.
Yeah, that's how I rationalize in my head as well. So, and the fact that I can barely walk. I mean, you see me walking around, man. I'm like dragging my leg, just praying that my Achilles didn't burst. So, always good.
Yeah, we're not getting any younger, that's for sure. So,
It's true. It's unfortunate. So, well, hey, I know tonight's topic here, it's a pretty important one. You and I have been talking a lot about this offline. Just really, when we're talking with individuals who are caught up in the struggle, it's sometimes really hard to see anything except the struggle and kind of have that filled with, shame and guilt and remorse and a lot of these feelings of just kind of feeling broken or something's like off. And there's a lot of this like deficit focused self-talk that people find themselves stuck in, right? Because when you are hurt and you're hurting, naturally your language is going to kind of match and mirror that. It makes sense, right? But I think what today we're really going to kind of dive into and focus on is how we can start changing that perspective. Instead of focusing on the hurt, the pain, the guilt, and those judgments and the criticisms that kind of come with that when we're really not feeling our greatest and we're caught up in the struggle, we're really going to focus on the strength it has taken to really survive and get through those experiences. You've heard me say it before, people's track records for getting through really awful times is 100%. Yep. And sometimes on those days we lose sight of that. And really what tonight's discussion between you and I, man, is going to be about just really honoring that survival, right? Really respecting and even being in awe at times of like the strength it took to get through and endure those difficult experiences that life kind of threw our way. And, what we know is that when we talk about mental health and we talk about trauma or just painful experiences that people can endure and that we can all experience, is that these can leave long-lasting impacts on us. And what, again, kind of loses sight, we're kind of diving into this, right? Like, we don't really focus so much on how much resilience that we carry or that people have within them to get through those situations that feel like they are never going to pass and that they feel like is too much. And yet, hey, it took an immense amount of strength that people carry within them to get through those moments. And sometimes we don't even see that in ourselves. And I know, Marc, you have a lot of conversations with people about this frequently. I see it, I hear it, I witness it really kind of helping people understand and see just what it is within them that they have that helps, that can be enough, you know?
Yeah, I mean, with me, I mean, obviously there was a lot of shame and there was a lot of guilt because with my mental health crisis and addiction crisis, there was a lot of collateral damage. And, we all know this if you watch the podcast, but I mean, I lost my marriage of 25 years. I lost my relationship with my kids. I have grandkids that I have not met. I lost a really well-paying job in the insurance industry as a manager for a large insurance company in Illinois. So there was a lot of collateral damage done. A lot of it was mindset resets and shifting the focus of my brain early on. And it didn't really start this way, Justin, but it eventually evolved to this, where literally I always tell people, I got two dates of birth. I got my actual date of birth, and then I got July 17th, 2020. And mentally, I basically told myself anything that happened prior to July 17th of 2020 was a different person. That's not the man that exists today. And I just try to focus on being the best version of myself today. But it took a little while to get there, man. I mean, I was in recovery for a bit before I had the confidence to actually say that to people because, sometimes people will remind you of your past, right. Oh, you're a drug addict, alcoholic, all that stuff. And I tell people all the time, I go, talk to me as the man that I am now, not the man that I was. That person no longer exists in this world. But, early on, for the audience that is still going through their crisis or maybe an early recovery, it was just really focusing on the positives that I was doing. If I had a week sober, I got a week of non-using. If I was able to get out of bed, dealing with the acute withdrawal syndrome and go for a walk, I was focusing on the walk around the block. I was trying to focus on all the positivity that I was doing and all the steps that I was taking to drive my recovery and have it become habitual and eventually have it become a lifestyle. And anytime a thought would creep in my head, in regards to some of the destruction that I did, or if somebody made a comment about it, I got in a good habit of shifting the focus. Okay, well, that was done. This is now. What am I doing now? What am I doing now to actually drive my health, drive my sobriety, drive my recovery? And, we've talked about this, whether it's diet, whether it's gym, but the same thing could be said about the mindset because you need to rewire the brain. You need to rewire your thoughts. It takes, a certain amount of time for it to become a habit. And then it takes a certain amount of time for it to become like a lifestyle. Your brain automatically goes there. And it's not as long as you think, 3 to 4 months of trying to be consistent reframing of the mind. But if you're consistent with that, your brain will automatically go to the positives of the situation or the good that you're doing. But it's a process while you're trying to get through it and try to train your brain or train your mind to actually focus on all the good stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, even as you're talking about this, I'm just kind of thinking about like Mark, from like your story, man, your experience of what you went through and just like carrying that respect for yourself. Like, especially early, I'm just kind of more curious, like early on, how did you not get stuck and get caught up in what was like the chaos and the pain and the hurt? Because, I mean, you throw out there kind of what you experienced and what you lost. Like, these aren't small, insignificant things. These were things that kind of made up your identity. You know what I mean? And so I think that's part of like, what in those moments did you have to do for yourself that really helped you get through those moments?
Well, here's the thing. My divorce wasn't finalized to May of 2021 because all the courts were shut down during COVID. So every time I had to go back to court in the latter part of 20 and the early part of 2021, when the courts were reopened, I was reminded of my past repeatedly.
Yeah.
During those divorce proceedings. And that was kind of hard to swallow, but again, while I'm sitting there in the courtroom, I'm reminding myself that was done. This is now. This is what I'm doing on a daily basis. I relied on a lot of different things, Justin. I relied on some exercise. Again, exercise back then was very different than what exercise looks now. I became an avid walker. I mean, I would get over like 10,000 steps per day easily, walking around the lake, listening to music, getting into nature, watching the sunset or the sunrise, depending on the time of the day, which is very peaceful to me. Trying to process everything that I'm doing right now. I mean, obviously, I started to make some slow dietary changes. I went to a lot of meetings, man. I went to a lot of meetings. I went to a lot of AA meetings, and I surrounded myself with people, that were in recovery. That anytime I felt that I was getting triggered or that I was kind of in a dark place, I had a Rolodex of contacts in my cell phone that I can contact people pretty much any time of the day, if I needed that extra support. Um, I did. I mean, it was. We talked about I mean, I was doing everything that I can because I had to live, man. I mean, it was it was a life or death situation. I started going to church, but I started going to a completely different church, a non-denominational Christian church. I went to recovery group meetings at that church. I mean, I lived a recovery lifestyle. I was all in because I had to fight like hell to get to sobriety, and I had to fight like hell to get my mental health in check. And then it just keep growing and growing and growing to where I'm at today. But I mean, I remember one time I had to do a, I had to do a, I had to do a deposition online virtually during COVID, and the other party's attorney, okay, my ex-wife's attorney, made the actual screen my friggin' mugshot from my DUI. So I literally had to stare at my mugshot for 2.5 hours while I was answering questions. And I mean, it's just the mind games that people try to play with you. But honestly, I shifted the narrative in my brain because I looked at me in that mugshot, and it was a disgusting picture. Okay, but then I mean, I looked at it. I'm like, man, this person doesn't even exist anymore. Be proud of where you're at, man. You've come so friggin' far. So it actually helped motivate me by looking at that picture for like 2.5 hours. So just a lot of reframing of the mind, surrounding yourself with support. I did rekindle my relationship with my higher power, and I tried to change my daily rituals. And I got really active in the recovery community. I mean, there's not one thing. I mean, I used this analogy once before with you, but it's that stock market analogy. You want to diversify. Your goal for retirement is to go from point A to point B and try to be as straight of a line as possible, which is impossible to do. But to do that, okay, you got to be diversified with your assets. If you have an undiversified portfolio, you might go from point A to point B, but it's going to look like this. You're going to have a lot of peaks and valleys. I wanted to minimize the peaks and valleys. So to be diversified with my recovery, I wanted to look at a diversified portfolio where it was more like this. I mean, yeah, I had good days, I had bad days, but the swings were not as radical because of all the support and all the things I was doing around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I mean, like you said, you got to diversify. You say that, I just like thinking like this old like skit that was on a show that was very popular in the early 2000s where they were talking about diversifying the portfolio, and it always resonates when you say that. So, no, but I think that as you're kind of like talking about that, I mean, you're really speaking on just like one of the key tenets of what sets people up for success in recovery, and how there's this big switch that has to happen in the sense of I have to prioritize me. I have to make myself in my life a priority in a way that screams like, I care about the outcome of this story. I am genuinely invested in my well-being. And those actions and those behaviors in of itself can really start countering that shame narrative that is running through people's heads, right? Or that like spiral we might fall into quickly when there's a reminder or something hits. Because you're talking about like staring at this picture for 2.5 hours and using that as fuel and motivation, as opposed to just falling into like a shame spiral, which obviously like the intention of that being thrown in your face was to like almost like publicly shame you for this.
I've trained my brain really to take the negatives, turn it into a positive, and use it as motivation. I mean, I'll be honest with you, and I'm not joking when I say this, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I get up ridiculously early in the morning and I go to the gym. I'm a human being. There are mornings, especially in January, where it's negative 30 degrees outside, with the wind chill, where I didn't feel like getting out of bed, much less driving to the gym and heading out in the cold, right? And I swear my brain shifts to I hear a comment that somebody made to me either while I was in addiction or maybe early recovery, or maybe somebody from my former employer made some negative comments because I lost my job because I got a DUI from that car accident and it was in the paper. And I swear to God, I use that as motivation because I want to be the best version of me because I want those individuals basically to eat their words.
Mm-hmm.
I want them never to doubt another human being again. I want them to feel uncomfortable in my presence. You doubted me? Here, this is where I'm at right now. That's just how I am. Now, I never was like that. I mean, I really wasn't. This is where the growth has occurred. Trying to play, I don't know if you want to call it mind games or shifting a narrative in your mind, but just try to take every little thing and spin it as a positive and use it as motivation. And that's where I'm at right now. And when I work with people, during the day, that's what I try to do as well, because I catch people, they'll rattle off something that's going bad in their life. But if I pay attention during the conversation, they accidentally mention 3 or 4 positives that's going on in their life. And I'm like, well, I understand you're going through a crappy time right now, but what about this, this, and this that you just brought up? Yeah, you're right. That's where your brain has to go. And that's where my brain goes automatically. But it was a lot of, I call them brain set resets or reframing of the mind early on. But like I tell people, like when you're going through major depression or you're going through acute withdrawal syndrome and you have a hard time getting out of bed or taking a shower or just doing basic hygiene and you're laying in bed, just beat up, your body's beat up like you went 12 rounds in a boxing match. Yeah, it might not be feasible to walk around the block. It might not be feasible to eat a meal because maybe you can't hold down a meal, but you can lay in bed and you can work on your mindset. And I did that early on. I did that early on. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of reframing. It was a lot of trying to focus on the positives. Okay, you got through withdrawals. Now what do we have to do next? You got the longest stretch of sobriety that you've had since you've been battling this addiction. Let's build on that, just different things like that.
Right. I mean, you're trying to not let the emotional reason kind of hijack your mind in the way everything's being interpreted. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. 100%. And I think what happens is it's interesting. And I used this analogy when I was speaking at the hospital, and everybody kind of smirked and laughed because I think they understood what I was saying. Like when you're in a mental health crisis and or an addiction crisis, you think you're doing a good job of hiding it, and you're the last one to find out that everybody around you already knows. At least that's how it was with me and a lot of the stories that I know. That's how it is. Well, when you're so recovery driven and you're focused on your health really for the first time in your adult life, and you're doing things to drive your health physically, mentally, and spiritually, what I come to find out is it's the same way in recovery. Everybody around you notices it, and you're the last one to notice it, and everybody's seen it already. It's just weird how that works out.
Right. I just think it's like, hey, that's like what honoring your recovery is all about, and honoring your survival here. It's like, it's just that evidence that, hey, there is resilience in that individual. There is determination there that's coming out through the actions and the behaviors that are being displayed for the world to see. And I think that goes such a far way, or long way, I should say. I can speak English,
Yeah,
because it's like, hey, what is my behavior saying about where I'm at and about how I'm viewing myself, right? I don't have to say
exactly.
anything, but you could just see it through what is actually being done and shown to the world here. And that goes such a long way in saying, like, I'm treating myself with respect. I'm invested in the outcome here. I'm being more gentle and understanding. And that is going to really help push us forward here in a way that we want to be pushed, because that allows you, and you're talking like the mindset reset, reframing, really kind of getting a different perspective on what is being offered to you in that moment, or even just kind of a different perspective on historically what was traveled through and what occurred and what transpired. And that's what this does, right? We're able to honor our recovery form this different relationship with ourselves, our mind, our body, and the actions that we're engaging in, we can start to now reflect and have a different perspective on what it was that we experienced and why certain behaviors or actions were engaged in at that time. It's not, hey, I'm deficient in this area or there's something morally wrong with me. It's like, no, I was caught up in the storm. My addiction, my disease, my mental illness had hijacked my brain. And it made sense that these behaviors were engaged in because it felt like it was life or death if I didn't act on it in those moments. And so getting this perspective and really understanding it, even though those moments, right, we kind of look at the past, doesn't mean that just because we have this new frame of mind or way of referencing it or looking at it, doesn't mean that they're not upsetting anymore or that they might not trigger you. They're going to have a reaction. The difference is in the way we choose to respond to them.
I mean, here's the deal, Justin. I can't change the damage that I did. All I could do is focus on being a better person moving forward. And that's it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's why I drew the line in the sand and said what happened prior to July 17, 2020 doesn't matter. I cannot change it. All I can do is work on being the best version of Marc moving forward. And I will tell you, I and you've heard me say this many times to people, I just focus on the day, win the day. And I tell people all the time, if they're in early recovery, it might not even be win the day. It might be win the hour or win to breakfast, win to lunch, win to dinner, and then win till it's time to go to bed. Mm-hmm. But it's never more than a 24-hour deal. I try to live in the moment as best as I possibly can. I try to control the controllables and the things I need to do to drive my recovery day in and day out. And what I've noticed is that if you win the day consistently over a period of time, really good things are going to happen in your life.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great point because it's like you're talking about, hey, let me focus on being in the moment instead of letting my mind hijack and pull me away from that. Because when we have these reminders of the past and these things that are upsetting show up in our mind, as much as we want to try and control it, squash it, kind of remove that part, like, hey, there's going to be these ideas that pop up just naturally because that's how the brain works, especially if there's something reminding us of it. And so that's the part where it's like, hey, what we can do is noticing that sometimes our body's reacting to this as well. If I can notice all of a sudden, hey, my breathing's starting to be a little bit different, or I'm starting to feel a bit more tense, or anxiety is creeping in. That's my body speaking that, hey, I'm carrying this experience and the impact that it had on me. Still, it's in there, and it's still with me here. And that part of me that's kind of responding this way does need a little bit more of attention by utilizing and embracing a lot of what you've been speaking about today, where it is reframing this, looking at it from a different angle. How am I talking to myself? How am I treating myself? What are my actions saying about me today? All that stuff goes together so beautifully.
It's huge. And I've talked about this before, but I'm going to throw it out there as well. I really think, because I made that comment earlier, but everybody noticed your changes around you. And you were the last one to realize everybody noticed. You're the last one to realize you changed. So you can't see the changes in your mind. I mean, you're doing the resets and so forth, but just like the subject matter and the way you carry yourself and just the way you live daily, people notice that, whether it's my mom or my sister or my nephews or a friend, a longtime friend or whatever. But I didn't really see that because I was doing things to drive my recovery, but they were seeing my growth. To me, I think a lot of people get active with some form of exercise and recovery because you hear this quite a bit. It's one, obviously, for the endorphin effect. They want to feel better. They want to feel better physically and mentally. But two, like for me personally, when I really started to actually like the person in the mirror again, is when I physically started to see that the work I was putting in was transforming my body. Okay. I could see I was losing weight. I was getting in somewhat, better shape than I was previously. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, everything I'm doing is working. And then you start talking to your friends and they're bringing up certain things about how you're living your life, or the subject matter you're bringing up, or the content that you're bringing out for lunch, and it's like, wow, this must really be working, and it's weird because I'll be honest with you. And I tell people this, I really don't think I feel like I'm doing anything special. I just did what I had to do to friggin' live. Because if I was going down the path that I went down, I'd be dead. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'd be dead. So it's like literally, I had to do certain things to get to where I'm at today, and if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't be here talking to you,
Right.
but it's funny because I've won a lot of industry awards. I've won a lot of trips, agent of the year, agency of the year in the insurance business and that. But I say this and I mean this sincerely, and I say this when I speak at the hospital. I truly don't think I've gotten more respect and more, I guess, recognition for the changes I made in driving my recovery than I've ever gotten professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way people react, the way people talk to me, the way people send me text, hey, you're motivating me or you're inspiring me. I'm like, I'm just doing what I need to do, but it inspires people, so it's like, it's cool, but it's still kind of hard for me to believe because I'm just doing what I needed to do. It's just, sometimes it's baffling to me. But I really do mean that. I feel like I get more respect for living a life of recovery and coming out of that major addiction and major alcoholism than I've ever gotten professionally. And I was in the insurance industry for 30 years.
Yeah.
And won a lot of awards too.
What were they again, Mark? Agent of the Year? No, I'm just messing with you, man. No, no, you just listed them off. But no, I think that's so powerful because it's like you look at it and just the overall way and the approach that you take, you're like, hey, it's just something I do. But it's just the approach you're taking with yourself just sounds so different today than it did in the years leading up to where you found yourself. And then the living hell you kind of found yourself kind of caught up in. And then you're like, hey, something's got to change. And it just sounds like what you also embodied in this process was like that compassion for yourself and like leaning into the pain, allowing yourself to kind of acknowledge it and go through it. And I think that's so powerful because you found things that work. And that's where you're like, I'm just living my life. Well, I'm doing what's effective for me and what I know helps me. And that when people see that, man, how many times do people say, like, if only I could do this? I just need to do, I'll do this when, blah, blah, blah. And then that action never happens. No. You took that step, right? You followed through and you executed it. And you're a living example of like, hey, I had that thought in my head. I knew what I needed. I turned inward. I heard that response when I asked that question. And when I asked that question, I was open to receiving that answer. And when I received it, I took action on it. And that's what is so powerful in all of this, is that supported you in finding a way to make it to where you are today.
It's like, so like early, like I think I was actually in active addiction still. I think I told you this. I was watching like videos late at night, and I started watching videos about like Stoicism, like the ancient Stoics. And I'm a firm believer that the 12 steps of AA was taken from Stoicism at some capacity, okay? Because there's a lot of principles in the traditional 12-step program that's very similar to what these ancient Stoics preached,
Yeah.
But, and you've seen me wear this shirt before, there's a Latin saying called amor fati, which means for the love of fate or for the love of one's fate. That comes from Stoicism, okay? And that's kind of how I live my life. I mean, when you start talking about like the pain of life or the painful moments, I mean, the one thing that the Stoics preached was your greatest opportunity to grow as a human being is through the most painful moments. Amor fati, love the fate, or for the love of your fate. Accept it, because this is a tremendous opportunity. And in early recovery, I kept reminding myself of that. There's a huge opportunity to grow as a human being. I never really realized like what it could lead to, a career change and working in the recovery world and speaking at hospitals, for NAMI and things like that. I could have never dreamt that, but it's just, again, it was a redirection, a transformation. You kind of find you do find your purpose in life, but you find your purpose in life by living one day at a time, living a life of recovery, controlling the controllables and focusing on winning the day.
Right. Well, I think you're just highlighting, like, kind of wrapping this up beautifully, man, where you're kind of talking about, like, hey, talk about survival. Survival is meaningful. It's not just getting through the day. This is meaningful, and it shows strength. And it's critical that we honor that survival, because that's an important step in this recovery journey.
Yeah, I think, just to end it with this, I think I don't want to make it, okay, so anybody that's out there battling an addiction or some type of addictive behavior or mental health crisis, you have strength. Okay. I mean, honestly, you probably possess strength more than the average individual has for going through what you're going through. Because the strongest people I met are people that deal with this stuff, and certainly the strongest people I met are the ones that have gotten in the recovery world. But I think what happens is you hit like a threshold, almost like a plateau in the gym, if you will. And when you hit that threshold, if you don't have education, you don't have support, and you don't have structure, things can kind of go awry. And like in my case, it kind of went awry with, the alcohol. And then I was introduced to the pain pills because of the neck and back, but I wasn't taking care of myself. So, I mean, it just all kind of was like a Pandora's box that just all came together at the right time. But I mean, I definitely know I was a strong person when I was going through what I went through. But the thing about it is the goal is to go past that plateau and continue to grow, or go past that threshold. And you get past that threshold, through, the education that you get in treatment or with NAMI support groups, the support that you get from people in the recovery community, and then creating that structure of, daily rituals or daily disciplines, whatever you want to call them, that's going to drive your health physically, mentally, and spiritually, as spiritually as your thing.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a beautiful way to kind of bring it to a close, man. So appreciate you as always, kind of shedding some light, sharing your own personal story here about kind of what this looks like for you in practice and principle, because I think this is such a critical thing and such an important step in recovery here. So
it is. And I appreciate you taking the time to ask the questions. And I appreciate you wearing that extra small shirt.
Hey, man.
I just wish that you were eating some Starburst jelly beans.
I know. I think
we got one more podcast, I think.
I mean, I'm just trying to cut down, man, so I can get in that youth large like you, big man. That's all. So, as always.
You
just teed it up. I can't help it.
It's all good.
All right, so we appreciate everybody listening to these podcasts. They are on the 1st and the 15th of every month. As always, feel free to write in, send us some messages. If there's anything you want to see us cover and talk about, we are always open to suggestions. I mean, candy of the month, whatever, like, no big deal. Marc's favorite lift in the gym. He'll be more than happy to share that with you. So, as always, we appreciate everybody tuning into these podcasts, and we look forward to everybody catching us on the next episode. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of NAMI DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.